I'm convinced that there are problems in Nigeria. People are dying. I've just received a text message from the bishop in my home diocese telling me that 29 people were slaughtered in one of our communities. These are the realities we're living with on a daily basis. And I say to people, the Trump argument, which I couldn't buy into, was this whole feeling that Christians are targeted and we are going to come and protect them.
Is it an approach of the Nigerian government to only come to you when the house is already on fire? Or do they consult you before the house is on fire? Your Lordship, welcome to West Africa Democracy Radio. It's a privilege to have you.
Thank you. The honor is mine.
Now, your diocese in Nigeria covers 4 states. By landmass, I think it's probably the biggest Catholic diocese in Nigeria by landmass. And a lot is happening in that area, insecurity, and there's a lot of critical minerals there. And I think that also informs the experience with which you spoke with today. Now, is it an approach of the Nigerian government to only come to you when the house is already on fire? Or do they consult you before the house is on fire?
Well, thank you very much. Very, very good question. But I mean, really, people don't consult you at the level of these issues. And as you know, there's very little genuine conversation going on between government and people. The governments across Africa talk down at people because it's probably just more focused on announcing the things we are trying to do, suggesting that people have very little voice in what really happens. So, and I think that a conversation like this should help us understand that there is need to scale up this engagement because we've had cases of communities being relocated without them knowing what exactly was happening. So for me, you talk about the house being on fire. Perhaps depending on the quality of consultation, I'm not talking about somebody like myself, but even with communities, that preliminary conversations are important to how public policy is formulated, because in that you gain a lot of confidence from the people.
How about the wider religious institution? Now, limiting this to the Catholic Church, obviously, which is your own institution. Before talking about the general religious institutions, how much of consultations do you think, in your experience, is going on between the government?
The problem with Nigeria is we're running almost like 2 systems of government. In northern Nigeria, mentally, people live in a theocratic state, to the point that the emirs are considered to be, although they are called religious leaders, but they are political appointees. So government believes that by consulting religious leaders, and I think across the country really, and as you can see, even how the Nigerian government reacted, whether it's the Niger Delta, the focus on traditional rulers very often is just part of the problem, because in many cases, as you've seen, in a place like Zamfara, some of them have been found to be entrapped in this in the conflict itself. But in Nigeria, there's 2 slightly different conversations going on. So when you ask the Sultan and I to be on a table, for example, I come as a religious leader. The Sultan is religious leader only to the extent that he's appointed, but he's appointed by the government. So northern Nigeria tends to focus on the traditional institutions. But across Africa, the reality is, you can raise a philosophical question as to whether feudalism can coexist with democracy. And in many cases, the governments tend to think that rather than dealing with the people, they like to deal with the traditional institutions because they believe that by proxy they are reaching the people. So buying new cars, building new palaces cannot be a substitute, because these have no impact on the lives of ordinary people. So unfortunately for us in Nigeria in particular, the governments have always found traditional institutions easy to co-opt, repeating the same mistake that the colonial administration did. So in going forward, part of our challenge is that these traditional rulers, some of them are pretty well respected, but it's really not the best way to figure out how people feel. So I think that for me, one of the greatest challenges is the inability of government and politicians, to reach out to the people, because government by proxy, it's convenient for them because they think that if you co-opt Bishop Kukah, he will help you mobilize his constituents. But in reality, as you can see, there is a direct a distinction between the lifestyle of those in power, the lifestyles of those, whether they're traditional rulers or we ourselves, and the lifestyles of the ordinary people.
It seems like there's a distance that probably society is not ready to talk about yet, which is the distance between, we talk so much about the distance between the government and the people. But from what you're saying, there seems to be a distance between the religious and traditional leaders and the people. But the difference is that probably people are not ready to talk about it yet. Is that the case?
The thing is, it is more a function of education. Because even in colonial Nigeria, the difficulty the British had was with the South. Largely because they were worried. That's where the agitation came from. People were asking questions about the efficacy of colonial rule. In the North, where you have a significant percentage of the population that has no access to Western education, then it's easy to create a myth. And so the politicians, as I said, have found it very convenient, really, really very convenient, to use the traditional institutions as proxies. But all this often come with a problem, because if you align too much with a politician, you also inherit his enemies. And that's why you often find that in some cases, this rubs off on the people in terms of their moral authority and moral credibility. So we are to be seen to be aligned with a government in power, whether it's APC, whether it's NDC, whether it's any government at all. Naturally, I'm likely to inherit their foibles. So my challenge has always been to try to stay above board, negotiating with the issues, but also critically ensuring that you don't end up being so close to government that it has a contaminating effect on your moral authority. But clearly, politicians in Nigeria, and I'm sure many parts of Africa, believe that, first of all, they are reluctant to reach the people, in part because they don't want the anger and the frustration. And that's why during campaigns, you rarely find they just go to where people are gathered, in a stadium, in a village square or whatever. Somebody mounts a podium, addressing people and goes. Contrast that sharply with what happens in Europe and America, where people are knocking on doors. And it is possible to have a politician humiliated by somebody closing their door at their face. That it also helps you. But in our own case in Nigeria and many parts of Africa, ordinary people have absolutely no contact with the political elite.
I think your track record for peace building, peacemaking, conflict resolution approaches and strategies, they speak for itself in Nigeria and even in Africa generally. And you spoke passionately about the US intervention last year in Nigeria, right, which was widely broadcasted. And you spoke passionately about that today. But many people are wondering, what was the body language of the government to people like you speaking out? Because you have the track record.
No, on this issue of religious persecution or whatever, the religious question in Nigeria, my PhD thesis was on power politics, religion and power politics in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria. So I think I have more than just a passing understanding of the intricacies and the issues. I'm convinced that there are problems in Nigeria. People are dying. I've just received a text message from the bishop in my home diocese telling me that 29 people were slaughtered in one of our communities. These are the realities we're living with on a daily basis. People are being slaughtered in Sokoto, in Katsina, in Kebbi, everywhere. And I say to people, the Trump argument, which I couldn't buy into, was this whole feeling that Christians are targeted and we are going to come and protect them. And I'm saying, no, I'm living in Nigeria. There's a web of relations. I will not want to be protected if my neighbor is not protected. But I think it also became very clear that what America was doing actually was its own strategic way of getting entry into Nigeria. And it's been able to negotiate gotten what it wanted. You can see very clearly that a significant percentage of the Nigerian population now feel thoroughly embarrassed by the fact that Trump made promises that never really came to be. What this says to me is we need to fix our problems. Not that we don't want foreign. No. Foreign is important, but foreigners should come and find us already at work, because you can peace is not something you can import from elsewhere. And because I live in Sokoto, and because of the experiences I have, I say to people, what was happening in Nigeria is what you may call mass atrocities. People were being killed at random. But I live in Sokoto, and I sleep more peacefully in Sokoto than I would in my own village, which is predominantly Christian. So my argument has always been that we shouldn't be focusing on religion because of its divisive impact. And most importantly, when I look at the situation in Sudan, when I look at the situation in Gaza, and all the gaps that have been open and almost impossible to close now, I always say, no, I don't want Nigeria to end up with this kind of situation.
What practical role, if any, can the church realistically play in the issue of conflict resolution as it relates to mineral governance, especially because you're from an area where there is a lot of informal gold mining, which many experts say is fueling insecurity in that region? What role can the church play?
I mean, remember that we are more present in Nigeria than the state. Okay, the Catholic Church in Nigeria alone has over 600 medical facilities and hospitals across Nigeria. We have the schools, perhaps some of the best schools in the country. We're far closer to the people than government itself. And we do the things we do without the support of government, even though we're asking government for greater collaboration and so on and so forth. But on the issue of these minerals, I mean, Zamfara is in my diocese, but I don't have the faintest idea about what is going on in Zamfara. I don't have the capacity. There's no way you can step into the situation. But it's almost an entire criminal enterprise. So it's not, and it is fueling the conflict. The tragedy with the Nigerian situation is that people in authority know what is going on. That's what everybody says he hears. The security agencies are largely demoralized, not well equipped, and so on. So we're in a very, very difficult place. Very, very difficult place that we can't figure out how to get into it. And I think that is the question of the government having the political way, to decide, because whatever knowledge I may have, whatever information I may have, in the final analysis, I'm a non-state actor. So it is government that creates the template for collaboration and cooperation.
Matthew Hassan Kukah, thank you for coming on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Thank you.